A federal judge appointed by President Trump just announced he would hold hearings in mid-May, getting to the bottom of these American children getting deported. And this judge accusing ICE of providing none of these families due process. That's the idea. That's why they're doing it. The father of the 2-year-old American citizen who was deported filed a lawsuit last Thursday claiming he attempted to communicate with the child's mother who was being deported. ICE insists the mother said, if you're going to deport me, I want to take my child with me. But the father of the child said he wasn't allowed to discuss it with the mother. He kept telling ICE that 2-year-old child is an American citizen. They weren't interested. All this as the father could hear his child crying and screaming in the background as he talked on the phone with that ICE field office. The father's sister-in-law, also an American citizen, tried to tell ICE, I'll take the child, but ICE wouldn't talk to her. And lawyers are now saying that ICE warned the father, do not come down here. This is what they said to him over the phone. Do not come down here. If you try to talk to us personally, we will detain and deport you as well. Now, in the past, we would say, well, the American people won't stand for this. Trump is saying this is going exactly the way I planned it. This is terrorism. The American people may or may not stand for this, but a lot of people are scared. That's the idea. As I said, Trump is failing to keep up with Biden's numbers. So public displays of terror make his deportation program appear way more voluminous than it actually is. Look at those people. And Trump's borders are, as Trump would say, is straight out of central casting. Tom Homan. Trump's borders are. He looks and sounds like the kind of guy who would torture 4-year-old American citizens suffering from stage 4 cancer. Tom Homan's job is to talk tough, never show mercy, because this isn't about government policy. It's not about solving a problem. There is no problem. This is about sadism. This is about satisfying the bloodlust of MAGA Republicans. So it's not the quantity of the deportations, it's the quality of the deportations. The horribleness of it all. The more savage, the better. Appearing at an early morning White House press conference to field questions, Homan said, we did nothing wrong. If a mother, he said, enters this country illegally and then gives birth to a child, and that child is now an American citizen, and they both end up getting deported, quote, that's on her. That's not on this administration, unquote. Homan said the mother knew what she was doing, and it was her choice to have that baby in the United States. Yes, it was also the mother's choice to live in a country torn apart by narco-terrorists and gangs, right? It was her choice to enter America, he says, illegally. Homan said, giving birth to a U.S. citizen is not a get-out-of-jail-free card and doesn't grant immunity from U.S. laws. So, a couple of things about this. We're talking about a woman. We're talking about a child. These are not gang members. These are not criminals. Our borders are porous because we need these people to work in hospitals, daycare centers, to do home care, to work in restaurants, and of course, to work in our agricultural sector. So despite all those ads Kristi Noem cuts telling migrants, stay out, these people are in fact very much welcome into our country, even now, because without these people, our economy collapses and there's nobody to care for grandma. There's nobody to handle our food or work at our daycare centers. And this is really important. And this is the danger of having so many stupid people living in the United States. So this is really important. It is not a crime to be in the United States without documentation. It is not a crime. I feel like repeating this 100 times. It is not a crime to be in the United States without documentation. Now, if you're trying to sneak into the country and they get you, they can send you back. But if you make it in here, it is not a crime. It is a civil offense. All the children who were American citizens that were detained and deported because their parents were performing routine check-ins at immigration centers, the parents were not illegal. They weren't undocumented. They were following the law. They were saying, hey, I'm here. We're trying to stay here. We want to become citizens. We're doing everything you told us to do. We have documents. We're doing our check-in. We're not hiding from you. Nobody is a criminal. It's not a criminal offense to be in the country without documentation. It's a civil offense. And if you're showing up for a routine immigration check-in, you don't get detained and you don't get deported unless Donald Trump is president. These are legally documented immigrants, women and children and men with zero criminal records, as well as U.S. citizens being deported. But because Trump is ashamed that Joe Biden deported more migrants than he did, ICE is grabbing anyone who isn't a real physical threat to the cowards who work for ICE. Because the last thing the cowards who work for ICE want is a physical altercation or a shootout. Now, I want you to listen to me very carefully, and I want you to go online. Has there been one shootout with any of these so-called criminal terrorists? I keep hearing about how they arrested these MS-13 members. Tren de Agua, they're waging war. Tren de Aragua, according to Donald Trump, when he invoked the Alien Enemies Act, said, we are being invaded by Venezuela. Nicolas Maduro, the leader of Venezuela, sent, according to Trump, in his executive order, said Nicolas Maduro, the leader of Venezuela, sent Tren de Aragua terrorists, gang members into America to rape, to murder, to kill. He says these are the most dangerous people in the world. Has there been one shootout between ICE and any of these terrorists waging war in the United States? If these people are the worst of the worst, waging war on the United States, they all seem to be going pretty peacefully into those ICE vans, putting up zero fight when ICE comes for them. Maybe you need to tell them they're terrorists. Maybe Trump didn't tell them that they're terrorists or waging war on America. As I said, ICE, cowards. The last thing they want to do is go for those really tough gang members. Hey, there's a 4-year-old with cancer, stage 4 cancer. That sounds safe. There's a pregnant mother. Let's get her. Send me a story. Let's, if you can find one story, send it to me of ICE agents rounding up MS-13 and Tren de Aragua gang members who were the gang members are like the Symbionese Liberation Army, you know, where there's even David Koresh put up a fight. Where are the shootouts with these? We're told we're at war. I thought war means shooting at people. They're the worst of the worst. These mothers, please, if you can find one example of MS-13 or Tren de Aragua not going peacefully. Not forget guns, just a physical altercation with ICE. Not running away. I'm talking, according to Trump, these are warriors. If you can find one example of a pitched battle between MS-13 and ICE or Tren de Aragua and ICE, please, I need to know. These mothers, their American children weren't breaking the law, but they were easy targets for the cowards from ICE, and they got sent back to Honduras. This is just cowardice. And then Tom Homan once again defended family separation. He invented with Stephen Miller during the first Trump administration, the family separation policy. Now, there was a father not able to see his 2-year-old. And Homan, and he does this all the time, he compares it to when a parent is separated from their child when the parent is sent off to prison. I've heard him say this all the time. Homan says, we're not separating families. In America, when we send people to prison, their families don't go with them. And if you're stupid, you go, oh, okay. Well, the immigrants, first of all, are not prisoners, and they're not criminals. They're not breaking the law. And it's the child being carted off, not the parents. You send the mother or the father to prison in America, not the child. Although another 4 years of Trump, who knows? Get it through your thick skull, America. Being in this country without the proper documentation is not a criminal offense. It is a civil offense. No jail time, because our nation's business model is undocumented workers. Our economy collapses without these people. So what's going on right now is Trump terrorized just enough to make it look like Trump's cleaning out the country. He's not, because he can't. He can just commit acts of terror, because none of this is real. It's not real. I've been telling you this for years. It's only real for the families. It's real for the people who are being deported and tortured. It's not real. It's not a real problem. This is a complete waste of law enforcement. It's a waste of money and time and oxygen. It's not a problem. It's a non-existent crisis, just an excuse for sadism. And by the way, Trump wants it both ways. He says we need to deport 14 million migrants because they're poisoning our country. But at the same time now, he's claiming this is now the safest border in American history. Tom Homan said it on Monday. He said this is now the most secure border in the history of our nation. Well, then I guess we don't need a border czar, do we? Problem solved, right? If this is now the most secure border in our nation's history, I guess we don't need to start transferring billions of tax dollars to Geo Group and Core Civic, our country's largest for-profit private prison corporations that donated millions to Trump last year. They're expecting billions of dollars in government contracts to build more concentration camps, for-profit concentration camps. Which one is it? What is it, the most secure border in American history? Or do we have to round up 14 million undocumented? They're documented. They have documents. 14 million people of color. Well, what is it? What's the answer? It's a border crisis when Trump needs it to be a border crisis. And it's the most secure border in American history when he needs it to be the most secure border in American history. Trump only succeeds when the number of stupid people in our country outnumbers those who still possess critical thinking. Trump and the Republicans govern. They win votes through anecdotal evidence, because they can't work. You can't run on the numbers, so you run on anecdotal evidence. It doesn't matter if violent crime dropped during the Biden administration. Talk about Lake and Riley. Just bring up anecdotal evidence. Doesn't matter if border crossings reached a 5-year low by the time Trump returned to office. You deport American citizens, send innocent fathers of U.S. citizens to that prison in El Salvador, calling him a terrorist. That's the anecdotal evidence Trump relies upon. So stupid people are convinced he's cracking down on migrants, even though he's not. The same way he relied on anecdotal evidence that there's a problem with violent immigrants, even though there's not. See, math doesn't lie. Trump and Republicans do. Migrants are less violent, less likely to commit a crime than American citizens. That's math. Border crossings began dropping in 2024 and are now at a 10-year low. Math. Migrants pay more in taxes than they take from the government. Math. Trump can't govern, can't win elections using math, so use anecdotal evidence. Find that migrant who got behind the wheel of a car drunk and ended up killing 3 people. And from that single shred of anecdotal evidence, millions of stupid Americans are convinced we're being invaded by Venezuela. Likewise, deport an American citizen who's 4 years old and suffering from stage 4 cancer. And from that one anecdote, stupid Americans are led to believe Trump is tough. He's cleaning up. No, Biden deported more migrants during the same period last year than Trump is doing now. Anecdotal evidence, because math doesn't lie. It's why our director of Homeland Security, this block of mascara and foundation in a push-up bra, wrote in her book about killing her puppy, Cricket. It wasn't revealed that she killed her puppy. She bragged about killing her puppy in her book. Why? To prove I'm presidential material. I can make the tough decisions like killing Cricket, our family puppy. PETA didn't expose this. This imbecile in a push-up bra bragged about it. Because if I can kill a puppy, I can drop bombs on innocent women and children in Yemen. There is reporting in Atlantic Magazine today that the Trump administration knew ICE blew it when it deported Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And at first, the Trump administration started to make plans to bring him home. But then, when it became a national embarrassment, Trump ordered everyone to lead with defiance, to use Garcia's gross injustice in order to test what the courts will allow Trump to get away with, in order to terrorize the migrant community, in order to convince hardcore MAGA Republicans that Trump is tough. By keeping Garcia in that prison, it papers over the raw numbers. It papers over the math that Trump isn't deporting as many people as he promised. Far from it. Not even as many as Biden. So he sees Garcia languishing in that El Salvadoran prison. He sees it as a gift that distracts attention away from how he's failing to deport the 14 million he promised he would. With MAGA Republicans, it's more important to sound tough than to be tough. It's easier to deport a 4-year-old American citizen with stage 4 cancer than an actual gangbanger, and you get more bang for your buck deporting a kid with cancer. It's so horrible. It's so horrible. It's all anybody could talk about. Well, I guess Trump is tough. He's tough. Same way the head of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, is tough. She killed a puppy. These are tough people. The more horrible, the more it works to Trump's advantage. That's why White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said, we're not even trying to bring Garcia home, despite the Supreme Court basically ordering the Trump administration to bring him home. Leavitt, despite all evidence to the contrary, still calling Garcia a designated foreign terrorist. Trump gave an interview on ABC News before his Michigan rally and said Garcia had MS-13 tattoos. And Moran, the reporter who interviewed him, said those were doctored. Those were proven to be photoshopped. And Trump just continued to lie because it doesn't matter what the truth is. President Trump's supporters are. Tom Homan also saying on Monday, Garcia is a terrorist. It's not. 2 weeks ago, Homan said ICE made a mistake. But now the official Trump party line is call him a terrorist. Defy the Supreme Court. Defy reality. Defy reality, because that's what fascists do. There are reports of arrests in 3 states of American citizens pretending to be ICE agents. That's what's going on. Regular Americans now are terrorizing migrant communities by pretending to work for ICE, which is pretty easy to do because they're all cowards. How tough is it to work for ICE? Are there any shootouts with these gang members? If you find any evidence of ICE having trouble rounding up these so-called terrorists, please send me the information. Big show of force over the weekend. The second man, believed to have stolen Homeland Security Director Kristi Noem's Gucci bag, arrested by ICE in Miami, Florida on Sunday. The suspect is reportedly an undocumented immigrant from Chile. You know, if I were Kristi Noem, if I were Corey Lewandowski, I would tell Kristi Noem to claim it was a massive sting operation, that she left the Gucci bag underneath her chair as part of a sting operation to get this guy, because she should be fired. She should be fired for the head of Homeland Security gets her bag stolen. 800 immigrants arrested over a 4-day period in Florida as ICE and state police conducted joint raids Publicity stunts, busy work. I played you the clip of the Republican last year meeting with Hispanic leaders on behalf of farmers, telling the Hispanic leaders, tell your people this is just for show. It's just political. Come to Florida and work and pick our tomatoes and our oranges. What we're doing is just for show. He's on tape saying that I played you the tape. The Fort Myers, Florida City Council voted earlier this year not to cooperate with ICE. But then they agreed to cooperate on this big crackdown after Florida's Attorney General sent them a warning. Florida law says the mayor and city council will be removed from office if they fail to assist the federal government in cracking down on migrants. A woman married to a member of the United States Coast Guard stationed in Key West, Florida, was arrested, detained after it was determined her work visa had expired. The woman was undergoing a security screening in order to live on the naval base when the computer indicated her visa had expired. Doesn't matter that she's married to a member of our Coast Guard, that she has no arrest record. Put her in a detention center because there's money to be made by putting her in a for-profit detention center. At least a dozen active duty soldiers stationed at Fort Carson were arrested in Colorado Springs, Colorado, early Sunday morning after ICE conducted a high-profile raid of an after-hours club. They rounded up nearly 100 people, more than a dozen of whom were active duty soldiers. 300 law enforcement officials from 10 federal agencies, including the local police and the DEA, assisted ICE on this roundup. Police say they seized guns, cocaine, meth, and they have reason to believe prostitution was taking place. The government claiming, go big here, we can look at the people they arrested. Look how tough they are. The government claiming among those taken in were Venezuelan and MS-13 gang members. Sure they were. Gang members. No reports of anybody putting up a fight. I mean, they seized guns? Was there a shootout? I mean, these guys are the worst of the worst. They're MS-13. They're Tren de Aragua. No reports of war, but 10 agencies, 300 law enforcement officials from 10 federal agencies to arrest 100 people, more than a dozen of whom were active duty soldiers. So 300 law enforcement officials to arrest 75 people. That's more than 3 law enforcement officials for each so-called migrant. I feel safe. Again, I've scoured the internet. I'm looking. If you can find one example of a well-documented example of MS-13 or Tren de Aragua gang members physically, forcefully putting up a fight as ICE arrests them, I would love to see it. How is this a war? How is this an invasion by Venezuelan gang members if I can't find one example of ICE finding resistance when they arrest these so-called terrorists? Again, if you can find any evidence, please send it to me. A new poll shows 53% of Americans disapprove of Trump's immigration policy. 80% of Americans, according to this new poll, believe immigrants with visas and green cards should receive due process before being deported. A Washington Post ABC poll has Trump's approval rating down to 39%. CNN puts him at 41%. This is the worst performance after 100 days for any modern American president. He's even doing worse than he did the first 100 days of his first term. A new PRRI poll of 5,000 Americans shows 52% of Americans believe President Trump is a dangerous dictator whose power should be limited before he destroys American democracy. Trump fuming over these polls, and who's to blame? Well, according to Trump, the pollsters, who he calls sick criminals. In the past year, he has said the pollster should be prosecuted for election fraud. Meanwhile, Trump is already suing the Des Moines Register and its former pollster, Jay Ann Selzer, after they came out with a survey right before the November election showing Kamala Harris winning Iowa. Well, she didn't, and Jay Ann Selzer quit. Trump is suing her. So, simple math. Joe Biden deported 5 million migrants in his 4 years as president. Trump, during his 4 years, deported fewer than 1 million. Why was Obama the deporter in chief? Because they were worried that the Republicans would accuse them of being weak on immigration. No matter what you do, the Republicans are going to accuse you of being weak on immigration. You cannot win the immigration debate unless you change the subject. The American people want to be good, but they need leaders to help them be good. Bobby Kennedy, in the last year of his life, was appealing to the voters' better angels. He would visit Appalachia. He would remind us that we have to take care of our most vulnerable. Joe Biden and Obama didn't want to crack down on immigration. They were trying. They thought, well, if we deport just enough, then the Republicans will stop beating up on us. No, they're going to beat up on you no matter what. So you've got to teach the American people the way Roosevelt did with fireside chats. Not to be self-serving here, but the way I do. Simple math. Explaining why we need these people. The president should have gone to the border. President Biden should have gone to the border and showed the women and the children and interviewed them and have them tell their stories and appeal to the goodness that's still here in our country. There's a migrant crisis, an immigration crisis, because there's a leadership crisis. We don't have presidents, we don't have Democratic leaders who are explaining that there are thousands of communities desperate for these migrants. We have ghost towns like Springfield, Ohio, which brought in those Haitian migrants here on temporary protected legal status. Republicans brought those Haitians into Springfield, Ohio, and Trump and J.D. Vance said, oh, they're eating cats and dogs. You need a Democratic Party that's willing to teach, to do the math, change the conversation about immigration. It's not about cracking down on immigration. It's about explaining to the American people we're a nation of immigrants. We're losing our population. You keep hearing Mike Johnson and J.D. Vance talking about how we have to produce more people. They want white people to reproduce. They don't want to bring in the migrants. Thank you. It has been a horrible 100 days. Let's make the next 100 days horrible for Donald Trump.